Hi, my name is Ahmed Zulazfar. People call me Zul, and I am an International Federation of Sport Climbing judge. I am a UX and UI designer by profession. I work for an agency called VMLYNR under the WPP group. On my free time, I will actually commit a lot of my time in climbing and also as a climbing judge for local and continental competitions. Climbing basically has three disciplines, so the difference between the three are such that lead climbing is essentially whoever gets to the highest point of that wall or that route wins. Whereas for bouldering, it's climbing without harnesses, but on top of a 5-meter wall, for example, with a mattress as your safety catch at the bottom. Whereas for speed climbing, I think it's quite explanatory. It's whoever that reaches the top the fastest wins. So that is the key difference between the three disciplines. However, for the Olympic moving forward, we actually have a combined format, which is essentially a combination of both the lead climbing and also the bouldering discipline. I started climbing when I was 13, back in 2004 in Springfield Secondary School, right? After that, I went into Temasek Polytechnic, where we are right now. From there, I was also a climber, but one of the days of one of our training sessions, we actually were given that option to join a national judges course. So from then on, I took that course with a couple of my friends, and we passed it, and eventually the rest was history. And now, even until now, I'm still a judge. So generally for events or competitions in climbing, you have a couple of key areas which is quite predominant or quite consistent in that sense, where regardless of discipline, it will always be there. For example, you have the call zone, otherwise known as the transit zone. You also have the isolation zone, you have the result service area, and also the main competition zone. So the competition zone is essentially the area immediately in front of the wall where the climbers will actually go there to climb. So for different disciplines, for example, where there is isolation zone, an isolation zone is essentially an area where we house all the climbers to isolate them for the general public, simply because under isolation conditions, they are not allowed to bring in their mobile devices or communication devices. They cannot communicate with the outside world. Essentially, it's just to keep them there before they actually climb the walls. So this way we can ensure fairness, and we really test them in terms of how good they are as a climber. And then there's the next part where we are looking at the call zone. So as I mentioned, the transit area or the call zone itself, it's essentially a place where we gather them, we line them up before their turn to climb. And we will have ushers to push them out to say, hey, this is your turn, you're going to climb. After this, you're just going to stand by, wear your shoes, wear your harnesses, everything to be ready before their climb. Of course, after that, we also have the result service area. So the result service area is essentially to generate the results, to tabulate scoring, and so on and so forth. So every other discipline will have a result service section. So that's where we do tabulation of scoring. We have to make sure the number of attempts accurate. We have to look at whether are there appeals that can come to us, and that's something that we have to essentially mitigate. So the role of an IFSC judge or International Federation judge essentially is to do a lot of pre-planning and also a lot of liaising with the event organizers and other relevant parties such as the route setters, for example. So on a local basis, on a national level at least, we have to do a lot of checking with the event organizers to make sure that the venue is suitable for a competition, for example. So there's a lot of walking the ground, talking to the vendors to see whether there are capabilities that's needed for the event or organization itself. But more importantly, during the competition as a judge, it's really just to focus on the judging of the national judges overall. So on my level, where I'm dealing on a continental level, all the national judges will be under my care. So all their judging will essentially go back to me. So my role as an IFSC judge in a continental competition is essentially just to make sure that everything is aligned So in an event where there are errors in the scoring or in the judging itself, that's where I come in to pretty much override and rectify any issues or any mistakes. At the same time, it's also my job to pretty much just liaise with all the team managers or the team officials, assuming they have verbal appeals. Let's say it could be an input error or data entry error where they say, hey, my climber should be getting a particular score, for example, but then it's not reflected on the live results. That's where I would go in and then verify whether it's an error or is it really our judgment as a judge. So on top of all this, that's also working with the other departments, which is our route setters. The route setters are essentially people who set up the routes for the climbers to climb. So a lot of times during the competition itself, there's a lot of liaising with them, there's a lot of communication done between the two relevant departments. So essentially, we will do everything from the scoring of the topo map, where essentially it's a list of all the handholds that's listed on the paper to see which handhold is equivalent to what score, for example. So all this scoring has to be done, everyone has to be aligned between the two sides to make sure that everything is correct, accurate, and it won't affect the scoring overall. Because ultimately, they may see it differently, but we see it from a scoring point of view, so therefore there could be a bit of friction here and there, but ultimately as long as everyone's aligned, that's more important. As a continental judge in the Asian Continental Council, I am also tasked to pretty much spearhead the local national judges development. So this is where we think about progression, we talk about passing the baton and also pretty much increasing the pool of judges both locally and also on the continental level. So on my end, I'm also part of the National Technical Commission, where we deal with the federation directly, which is Singapore Sport Climbing and Mountaineering Federation. We work very closely hand in hand to ensure is there a progress or a succession route for the local judges. So this is where we organize National Judges Course, which I happened to take 14 years ago, but now instead of me taking that course, it's me helping to conduct that course. So it's essentially a succession, a progression route, and for everyone or whoever that's interested in going into the judging line, this is their avenue. Okay. So my most memorable experience is always meeting your idols, right? So I think as a climber who has been in the scene for quite long, you tend to know a few legends, and this particular legend goes by the name of Kim Jae-in. She's a Korean climber, and I've always liked the way she climbed, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people can attest to that. So one of the years when I was doing my internship as a continental judge, I was selected to go to Japan to handle the Asian Championship. And that was essentially the very first time I met her in person instead of watching through an online YouTube stream, for example. So obviously I took photos with her, I took, maybe I didn't take an autograph, but yeah, I definitely took a lot of photos with her, and everyone was like, wow, you met Kim Jae-in. I was like, yeah. And then, just nice, earlier this year, or rather earlier last year, I also had to do officially as a continental judge in the Asian Championship, this time not in Korea also, so naturally she competed, and then again I got to meet her again, so it's like kill two birds with one stone, right? So so that was pretty much my most memorable experience for judging. Ironically, nothing to do with judging, but it's just meeting somebody you pretty much idolize for the longest time. Yeah. I used to be in Temasek Design School under the Interactive Media Design course code number T21, which I believe is no longer around, but I think now it's also known as Communication Design. I actually joined TP through the Joint Polytechnic Special Admission Exercise, otherwise known as JPSAE, which is also using climbing to join this school. So as a student going into TP with that special admission exercise, you are required to pretty much balance your time between climbing and also your studies. So you need to contribute in terms of your CCA, which is at that point of time it's called TPSC, Temasek Polytechnic Sport Climbing. And also as a student, you obviously have to come out with all the necessary grades, homework and stuff. That's pretty much it. So one key thing as a student that pretty much brought over that I can relate even until today as a judge or even in my day job is the fact that considering that I have to balance out these two things in my life, there's a lot of times which required essentially time management. So essentially as a designer on your normal day job, you actually have to set aside time to do actual work and then also to attend meetings, stand-up meetings, so on and so forth. But then on the side, even as a judge or as a climber, you actually have to find time to actually do it. So if there's one biggest takeaway I felt was actually time management. And I think that pretty much applies to everyone. However, this takes a little bit more effort because you have to juggle that on top of your personal life, family, friends, so on and so forth. So that was pretty much, I felt the most relevant even until today. I think the message I would want to give to any aspiring sports person or anyone who wants to go into the industry of sports or CCA for that matter, I think the biggest takeaway is that you really need to do it out of passion. A lot of times I feel that once the commercialization of things happen, then the passion may not necessarily be there. You're kind of doing it just for money, right? So, and I think I dare say I speak for a lot of other people who are similar in my shoes, where if it's not for passion, we wouldn't be where we are right now. So I think it's a lot of times, we want to do it for the right reasons. We don't want to always or only do it for money. And I think that kind of sets up the bar different from the rest. So I always get this question as to, am I still climbing? The answer is yes. However, it's more on a leisurely basis. However, one of the key considerations as to why I still continue with judging is because it's that one sport that I started since I was very young. It was something that I wasn't really ready to let go, essentially. So to me, I've always saw that if at least by judging, I can still be part of the climbing community or the climbing scene itself, and that's pretty much the main reason why I still continue going with the judging itself. So it's about getting the best of both worlds. I get to still climb, but at the same time, I can also improve myself as a person to be something more like an official, for example. Yeah.